night, a record number of A grades, but fewer passes overall. Scotland students get confirmation of their results after a school year like no other.
I think I could have done a bit better, but I think for how challenging of a year it was, I think I did all right.
Also making the headlines, experts are increasingly hopeful the worst of the pandemic is behind us, but are still divided on whether children should be vaccinated.
On form, Hibs fly out to Croatia in a confident mood as they look to progress in Europe after a positive start to the season.
And I'm here at the Edinburgh Fringe at an unusual venue with the best backdrop in town.
I'm McKay in Glasgow.
And I'm Sophie Wallace in Edinburgh. This is the STV News at 6.
Good evening. A grades in Scotland are at their highest ever level, but overall the number of pupils gaining qualifications is down. This year's results were based on teacher assessment rather than exams after last year's controversial algorithm.
A record number of students will be starting university in the autumn, having come through the disruption caused by the pandemic, as Louise Hosey reports.
On results day, Scotland's school pupils would normally be waking up filled with nerves, excitement and anticipation. But this year it's been different. Students across the country already received their provisional grades back in June. Today came the official confirmation.
It was hard and it was very different to what we'd been used to, but with the online learning we managed to get through and get the results we needed. So
we were used to our exams and the process of that, so just really adjusting and being a bit resilient about how we're having to deal with new things.
I got 3 A's and 2 B's, and I think I could have done a bit better, but I think for how challenging of a year it was, I think I did all right.
So proud, so proud. She's always been a starter, but she has just shown such good resilience this year.
Sometimes it's been quite cramped, you have so many tests in a week, but it's been good. The school have helped a lot with that.
For a second year, the ongoing impact of COVID-19 meant formal exams were cancelled, with grades given instead by teachers based on continuous assessment.
You know, the hard work that went into that very short period of time, working with the young people and giving them as many chances as they possibly could to evidence their outcomes. And so, yeah, a great deal of relief and pride that we've managed to get there.
This year's results reveal a slight fall in the pass rate compared with last year. The figures show the percentage of pupils getting A to C grades in their Highers fell from 89.3% to 87.3%. Advanced Higher candidates achieving a pass dropped to 90.2% from 93.1%. And National 5 scores also fell from 89% to 85.8%. Meanwhile, the attainment gap between pupils from deprived and affluent backgrounds widened slightly over the last year. Despite this slight fall in attainment, the pass rates were better than pre-pandemic level, with the highest number of higher passes recorded since 1999. There was also a record high in the number of pupils receiving A grades.
We've seen record numbers of passes for Highers and for advanced Highers, and that's down to the hard work our young people in under circumstances that none of us could imagine, and of course to the magnificent support of the teachers who have helped them through the last year.
This year's assessment system differs from that used in 2020 after an outcry over the method put in place to determine grades. An algorithm system led to 125,000 results being downgraded, affecting more than 70,000 pupils. The Scottish Government later reversed the decision, saying students would retain their original marks. It also announced it planned to scrap the country's exam body, the Scottish Qualifications Authority.
I'm confident that this is a credible set of results. Teachers right across Scotland have worked really hard to make sure young people get the right result first time, and that's been supported by quality assurance from SQA and quality assurance locally.
We were told this year there'd be no exams at all, and then we've seen young people asked to sit exams in all but name. I think it's high time we say these past 2 years have not been good. They have let young people down, and it's time to return to the traditional exams we're used to in Scottish schools that have worked well in the past.
Scotland's teaching union says whatever system is put in place in the future must be carefully considered.
You know, the lessons learned from this academic session and the past academic session, just about putting all our eggs in the basket of one-off high-stakes assessments. I think that there are important lessons to be learned for Scotland as a whole about how it approaches assessment within the senior phase. And indeed, we've had indications also from the OECD and from the International Council of Education Advisors that it's time for Scotland to think differently about its senior phase assessment.
A decision on what form exams will take next year is still to be confirmed. It's expected to be announced by the Education Secretary shortly. Louise Hosey, STV News.
Our political editor Colin McKay has been looking at the results. And Colin, how is this playing out?
Well, last year it was absolute chaos. You saw thousands of students having their grades marked down. They felt let down by the system. That was an absolute chaotic situation, and it was only resolved when the government formed their U-turn and returned to the grades set by teachers. This year it's been plain sailing by comparison. Teachers' assessments have been stuck by. Young people have got what they felt that they deserved, and you can see that by only 4,000 appeals this year. That's a third of what they would have normally had in pre-pandemic levels. Also support today from employers for the results, and also from the universities. A record number of Scottish students getting into Scottish universities.
And Colin, how do this year's results compare with previous years?
Well, the Tories say that they show that young people are actually worse off this year than they were last year. An increase in the poverty-related attainment gap, slightly higher last year, only slightly higher. But to me, the biggest difference is if you compare it to pre-pandemic levels. In 2019, there were 52,000 A grades at higher. This year, there were 92,000. And that poverty-related attainment gap down from 17% in 2019 to about 8% this year. Now, that is leading to a debate raging over the future of exams. Some claim that it shows that the system was downplaying students' performance before the pandemic. Others say that what we've seen just now means that A's are being given out like sweeties. That debate will continue to rage out. Some people arguing over the future of exams themselves, but they will continue next year. The thing that will be scrapped, though, is the SQA.
Colin in Edinburgh, thank you.
One of Scotland's preeminent experts on the COVID-19 pandemic says she believes the worst of it is behind us. Professor Devi Sridhar has told a parliamentary group the success of the vaccination programme means the biggest issue now is whether children should be immunised.
Today's meeting also heard calls for coronavirus testing in future to focus more on those who are ill rather than the wider community. Our senior reporter Gordon Cree has the story.
Getting needles in arms has played a massive role in bringing the country out of the grip of coronavirus, and now those receiving the vaccines are getting younger as 16 and 17-year-olds can drop in to get a first dose.
I feel so excited. At least I'm safe. Yeah, and then I was told to come back in the next 8 weeks.
I'm really hoping to keep my friends and family really safe, and I'm also going to a nursing degree at the moment, so I'm really hoping to keep others that I work with safe as well.
What means to me the fact that I'm able to go abroad now. I mean, my family are all from Cyprus, so being able to go see them.
More than 3.3 million people in Scotland have now had both doses. In contrast to the parts of the world with low vaccination rates, those who study the pandemic are increasingly confident the UK and Europe's worst days are behind us.
Hi, welcome everybody. Lovely to see you.
The issues surrounding that have been discussed at the all-party parliamentary group on coronavirus, which took evidence today from a number of experts.
I think the vaccines, barring a very, very difficult variant, will hold up incredibly well. And we are going to be looking at a health service overrun perhaps by other health issues that come back with a vengeance when people start to mix. And so still not an easy winter, but one that is not yet COVID focused exclusively, but is bearing the brunt of a winter going ahead.
The professor believes with some schools returning as early as this week, the question of how we deal with children is vital. She said among experts there are differing views on whether they should be vaccinated. Some have suggested it as a way to help avoid high numbers of pupils missing classes through having to isolate. But today's meeting also heard a change in the approach to testing would help.
So if someone is unwell, they should be tested. But for those contacts in the classroom, if they're not unwell, then it makes sense for them to be in school and being educated.
He also advocated ultimately taking a similar route when it comes to testing adults. Just over 1,000 new cases of COVID were recorded in Scotland today, but the numbers in hospital and intensive care continue to fall. Gordon Cree, STV News, Edinburgh.
Hundreds of families living in Falkirk villages who are paying huge bills for energy prices say they're being forced to choose whether to eat or heat their homes for another winter. Last year, Falkirk Council committed to replacing electric heating systems in almost 700 properties after Scottish Power discovered an issue with the boilers.
But a year on, the council has now told residents more work is needed to continue with the project, leaving dozens of families in Slamanan, Avonbridge, California and Whitecross fearing the cold months ahead. Courtney Cameron reports.
After months of campaigning, residents in the Braes area were overjoyed when Falkirk Council agreed to extend its mains gas supplies.
676 houses in the Falkirk area that are off gas will be replaced with mains gas heat.
But a year on, nothing has changed, and the council says more funding is needed to continue.
Let us think that we're getting gas for a full year and then whipped it right under our noses.
We're the people that have been dealing with everyone's problems and issues with the system, how the hardships that they're facing, having to create a food bank to support people because they don't have enough money after putting all their money in an electricity meter. We're now back where what do we do next?
The pair spearheaded a community campaign after discovering hundreds of families were spending more than £100 per week on prepaid electric meters. Scottish Power investigated and discovered some homes were using 3 times more energy than the national average due to the boilers being inadequate for the properties. Mina and Andrew Black say they may be forced to give up their home this winter if the high power costs continue.
I don't want to quit. We might not have a choice because we can't afford to heat. I'm glad I can bake, I'm glad I can crochet, because that's the only way we can save money to put in here.
Embarrassed. We are embarrassed.
For the first time in the year and a half STV News has been following this issue, Falkirk Council agreed to an interview on camera.
We did a costing for the project and the council allocated monies. Unfortunately, the quote has come back significantly higher than anticipated, and we need to understand why that is.
Dozens of families have told us that this is forcing them into extreme poverty. Surely this should be a top priority for the council to fix.
We accept that people are in extreme poverty. Unfortunately, until we get an agreement around the costs and be able to sign the contracts to put the infrastructure into the gas into homes, Falkirk Council can't then go in and actually change the inside heating systems. We will look to do whatever we can to help those in the greatest need.
The Scottish Government says it's aware of the challenges facing residents in this area, and it's working with Falkirk Council and Scottish Gas Networks to explore solutions. Meanwhile, families like the Blacks are already doing all they can to prepare for the winter ahead. Courtney Cameron, STV News, Falkirk.
Other stories across Scotland, and the former Rangers chairman Charles Green has accepted a £6.3 million payout from the Crown Office after being wrongfully prosecuted. Lawyers acting for the Lord Advocate offered the settlement hours before his case was due to start at the Court of Session in Edinburgh.
The Scottish Health Secretary and his wife have begun legal action against a Dundee nursery which they claim discriminated against their daughter. Hamza Yousaf and his wife Nadia were refused a place at Little Scholars Nursery for 2-year-old Amal, while applications by white Scottish children were approved. The nursery says it's open and inclusive to all.
Scotland's beaver population has more than doubled in the last 3 years. There are now more than 1,000 animals. A survey has found beavers are rapidly expanding out of Tayside, where they were first introduced in 2009, into new areas, including Stirling and Crianlarich. A project to reintroduce a huge colony of oysters into the Dornoch Firth has reached a major milestone. Marine biologists from Heriot-Watt University have partnered with Glenmorangie Distillery to release the 20,000th oyster into the waters.
The environmental programme is now being closely monitored by scientists to see if it could pave the way for other European efforts to tackle climate change, as Nicola McKay reports.
A fresh take on the water of life. These oysters are destined for a new home in the Dornoch Firth as part of a major environmental programme to regenerate a reef in the area. The project's being brought to life by scientists from Heriot-Watt University in partnership with Glenmorangie Distillery, which sits on the edge of the waters.
The waste from the distillery goes into the sea, and in 2017 we introduced an anaerobic digestion plant which purifies the waste out of the distillery. It's all organic, and 95% of the job is done by that. But we thought, well, what about the other 5% of purification, water quality enhancement? And in some crazy moment we hit on the idea of oysters, because oysters really filter water like crazy, and one oyster can filter up to 200 litres of water a day.
300 oysters were initially rehomed here when the project started in 2017. Now a milestone of 20,000 oysters has been reached, with plans to eventually site 4 million of the molluscs here. Oysters were found in the Dornoch Firth around 8,000 years ago before they were fished to extinction in the last century. Now it's hoped they'll play a key environmental role, both filtering and purifying water and storing carbon.
They filter the water when they've, not wanting to put too fine a point on it, but when they've finished with those particles, they poop it out onto the seabed. And our work has shown that there's a trebling of the amount of carbon going onto the seabed through that process. And then they lock that away amongst the shell material that they build up over time. And the shell itself is calcium carbonate. So there's a carbon store that forms around these habitat types.
Normally paired with champagne, not whisky, the oysters will be spared the fate of ending up on diners' plates, as they're in a protected site and it's illegal to remove them. The Dornoch Environmental Enhancement Project is now being watched closely by the scientific community to see if these tiny creatures could make a big difference to climate change elsewhere in Europe. Nicola McKay, STV News.
Now, a new project aiming to tackle plastic pollution teed off at Dumbarnie Beach in Fife earlier. For the Ocean is bringing young golfers together to learn about marine conservation and the impact litter has on the environment, as Saul Sivright reports.
Switching the golf clubs for litter pickers. These young golfers are helping to keep the beach spick and span while learning about marine wildlife and pollution.
What we've been doing is we first discussed about animals like litter, what's the top 5 things you'll see on the beach here, and the top is plastic, and obviously plastic doesn't dissolve, so it's really hard for the animals if it goes into the sea, and if they swallow it then they could die.
We found a lot. I think I totaled up roughly around 201 pieces, so something around that we found, and we were only here for about an hour-ish, so, and we only covered 100 metres, so if you covered the whole beach you'd find a lot more.
It's part of a new project created by the golf brand Ocean Tea, focusing on sustainability in the golfing industry.
If we have 60,000 spectators at a golf tournament and they're all littering versus everyone being educated, using stainless steel bottles, not using plastic, littering accordingly and recycling, that's going to make a huge impact in one event alone. So if we can ingrain these habits and ways of life and influence the culture of golf, essentially, I just believe that would make a massive impact.
Working in partnership with the Marine Conservation Society, the initiative is encouraging younger golfers to turn the tide on coastal pollution.
Golf courses being so close to beaches is really a big area for us to look into, and also people who are interested in golf tend to want to help to protect the environment that they so love and they play on day after day. So yeah, it's a sensible link for us and we hope to do more of that in the future.
Saul Sivright, STV News.
All right, loads in sport now with Sheila.
Get your fill of the action.
STV Sport, sponsored by Papa John's.
Good evening. Jack Ross believes the early season form of their attack-minded players can give them confidence as they look to book a place in the Europa Conference League playoffs. The Easter Road side set off for Croatia this afternoon ahead of Thursday's second leg against Rijeka.
Off on their travels again and with the appetite for continuing their European adventure. Kevin Nisbet joined his teammates for the trip to Croatia after missing out in the weekend win over Ross County. The ties finally poised after the 1-1 draw at Easter Road, but Jack Ross thinks they've learned a lot from the first leg.
I think we had it in the previous round as well. You can do all your analysis and prep, but there's no substitute for experiencing it first hand, and particularly for the players. So they now know about their immediate opponent, they know about Rijeka offer collectively as a team, and I think that's why we travel in a good mindset as well.
Martin Boyle already has 5 goals to his name this season, and with Nisbet, Christian Doidge, Jamie Murphy and Kyle McGuinness also finding the net, there's no shortage of confidence in attack.
It's nice to start the season in that manner. They had those forward-going players had a good season last year, but if you add in now Kyle McGuinness and Jamie Murphy who had injury disrupted season last year, who are fit and strong at the moment, and for them all to be off the mark and playing well and scoring at this stage of the season is terrific.
Hibs will train tomorrow in Rijeka ahead of the game on Thursday night.
Well, Hearts have confirmed they won't have any allocation for Sunday's trip to play Celtic in the League Cup. The Parkhead side have been told they can have a full house because they're using a section of their stadium for socially distanced players and staff. There is no room for away supporters. Rangers boss Steven Gerrard says he expects his players to raise their game when they face Malmo in the second leg of their Champions League qualifier tonight. Raman Bardwaj is at Ibrox for us.
Yes, a very good evening from Ibrox, where tonight, for the first time since March last year, Ibrox will be full to capacity. It's Rangers against Malmo in their Champions League qualifier. And Steven Gerrard's side must overturn a 2-1 defeat from the first leg to progress to the playoff round of this competition. Rangers have yet to find top form this season, but their manager Steven Gerrard expects a big performance tonight.
The way the scoreline sits, we have to take the game to Malmo and be aggressive and be positive. But obviously our away goal is different this season, but we knew that before the game. It is what it is. But in most games, when we've been set a challenge, certainly in Europe against big teams, important teams, these boys have delivered more often than not.
We're just really looking forward to getting the fans back in, them getting behind us and us going out and put on a performance to try and please them and get ourselves through to the next round, but it's going to be difficult.
Well, the good news for Rangers and Steven Gerrard is a number of players returns. Fashion Sakala, Leon Balogun and Yanis Hadji all missed the defeat at Tannadice at the weekend, but they are back this evening. I should point out that Rangers will be wearing their third kit, which is purple in colour, as their first 2 kits clash with tonight's visitors, Malmo. Kick-off here is at 8 o'clock. We'll have best of the action on our late news at 10:30.
OK, a final bit of news for you, and Liverpool manager Jurgen Klopp admits Scotland captain Andy Robertson is a big doubt for the World Cup qualifiers next month, but he hasn't yet ruled him out. The left-back damaged ligaments during his club's friendly with Athletic Bilbao, and although he said it's not a major injury, Klopp admits he will miss the first few weeks of the season, and he's unsure if he will return before the international break. OK, that's all the sport from me for this evening. Lots of European action this week, and you can keep up to date on the STV Sport website.
Get your fill of the action. STV Sport, sponsored by Papa John's.
All right, to the weather now, and Philip has been taking a look at all of the fabulous photos you've been sending in.
Thank you. Hello, good evening. Well, it hasn't been the greatest weather conditions lately, but it has still remained fairly nice in some spots, and it hasn't stopped lots of you from going out and about and taking some beautiful pictures from across the country. This is a reminder to please keep sending them in to us on Instagram at STV Weather using the hashtag STV Snaps, and we'll share them during our forecasts through the week and across the weekend. Let's take a closer look at what's in store. Here is the forecast.
skies and sunshine are in the forecast. TUI sponsors STV Weather.
Well, thankfully today has remained fairly settled for some, thanks to a weak ridge of high pressure that's built across the country. It is very brief, however, as tomorrow low pressure returns from the west, turning things more changeable. Now, through this evening, we are still seeing one or two isolated heavy thundery showers here in the east, but those will eventually start to fade overnight. And like last night, we'll see dry and clear conditions developing quite widely. Through the early hours of tomorrow morning, though, we see further cloud spreading in from the southwest, followed closely by patchy light rain. Thanks to the clear conditions, it will be a cooler night than last night, temperatures reaching lows of 9 or 10 degrees Celsius, but in some rural spots it could be feeling a little bit chillier. So for tomorrow, a dry, bright start to the day here in the east. However, we do start to see that rain further west picking up strength through the course of the morning, turning heavier and more persistent. Through the day, that will spread eastwards, accompanied by a strong southerly breeze. However, it is slow moving, so here in the east it does remain dry for much of the day. It's not until later on in the afternoon that we start to see that heavy rain arriving. Thanks to the rain and the cloud, temperatures are down a degree or two, highs of 20 degrees. Then on Thursday we'll see further fronts moving in from the west, bringing with it one or two more showers. Bye-bye.
TUI sponsors STV Weather.
And finally, tonight, the Edinburgh Fringe is famous for making use of unusual venues with a beach, woods and a bus stop among the spots you can enjoy performances this year.
There are also shows taking place at Multi-Story, a car park that's been converted into a venue space with one of the most picturesque backdrops in the capital. And Laura Boyd is there for us now.
Well, a car park may not exactly seem glamorous, but here at the NCP at Castle Terrace in Edinburgh, it has indeed been converted into Multi-Story, a venue with a stage, a bar, a street food, and some of the big names at the festival, including Fred McCauley and Leah McKay. Now, Leah, when you heard you were performing in a car park, what did you think?
I mean, I knew it was going to be great, but I could not have imagined this. I mean, isn't it awesome?
With the castle there.
The castle, you're going to see it, like, it's right there, and it's like the perfect backdrop. I mean, what could you ask for?
It just doesn't look like a car park, does it?
No, it doesn't. It totally doesn't. It's really cool. I've tested out some of the food because I'm a big eater, as you know. So I've had some lovely chicken. They've got great stuff down there. They've got some alcohol or non-alcoholic beverage, whatever you want. It's got a real festival feel about it. It's really cool.
And you're bringing your show, Big Fat Fabulous Diary here, the best bits.
Yes, well, I say the best bits. I mean, I've picked them. They might not be the best bits, but I hope they are. Yeah, it's great. It was from tour. It was a brilliant Scottish tour, so we're bringing it to the capital. What better place to do it? From the 23rd till the 29th of August, the last week of the Fringe at Multi-Story.
And after such a tough time for the arts, does it feel like the festival is bringing some hope?
Yeah, absolutely. Everybody's so happy to be back, especially for stand-up comedy. I'm a big champion of stand-ups. I don't claim to be one, but I'm really supportive of them, and that's the reason I'm here, is to really support the return of live. It's so important. It's been a terrible, terrible time for our industry.
Well, Leah, we can't wait to see it. It does seem like a car park, a castle and some comedy is the perfect recipe for a great night out in the capital. Laura Boyd, STV News.
And that's all we've got time for this evening. The late news is at 10:30.
From all of us here, thank you for watching. Have a good night.
Bye-bye.